And I got to click on go for Instagram too because I don't know why it just doesn't automatically go live. Click go live. Here we go. Sweet. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Fran and Friends podcast. Today I have Maureen Mayo with us. She is the owner and founder of Scottsdale Yoga Therapy. She mentions in her bio that yoga has helped her to center her life, and she wants to take the peace and serenity that she finds in the yoga studio, and transition that to how we can utilize that in our own lives. Is that right, Maureen?
Correct. Right.
And I'd love for her to share a bit more as to how long she's been in yoga, how yoga has affected your life. Obviously, you became a yoga teacher. and, and what is yoga for people that, they might have an idea of what it is. But I love the idea that people come from different perspectives and they can share what that looks like to them and the journey of it.
Right. Yeah, I love how you frame that because yoga is so mainstream now, and so people like, oh, yoga pants, or they have like this association of like, oh yeah, I'm by the beach and I meditate. It's interesting how people have these ideas once you say yoga, the imagery they get, and it's a practice, it's a lifestyle, right? And so, from my perspective and from how I practice yoga, it's it is what you were saying, right? It is my lifestyle of what I practice on the mat, I take off the
Mm.
mat. So, for example, it's when I'm pushing my I don't like the word pushing, that sounds kind of a lot. But if when I'm in a yoga pose and I can feel like the strength of my body, I can feel my nervous system of like, am I pushing my edge where I'm getting uncomfortable? And what do I do with that on the safety of my mat? So when I'm off the mat and something happens where my nervous system is triggered, and I practiced it on the mat of how I can respond. So when I'm off the mat, um, I know that, oh, my strength, or my perception of this trigger can be calmed, or I can leave the situation. It's like I know how to respond better because I've practiced it on the mat. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Because now that brings me to a question like, so when we're on the mat, and then also too when we're experiencing whatever we are experiencing in our lives, whether it is frustration, anxiety, happiness. So you're saying that if we are aware on the mat, if I'm hearing correctly, that we can feel those same things if we bring an awareness to our body when we're in those poses.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Correct. And then what makes yoga different from, like, say, weightlifting? Because you have those aspects with other types of exercises like running. With yoga, it's been around for 6,000 years, right? It has a philosophy behind it. So no matter if you did study the philosophy or not, there's something about the poses, there's something about the position of the body, and there's something about the way that it's practiced that, and then also what makes it different is the last pose is shavasana. Right. So after each yoga class, you have this last pose, shavasana, which is corpse pose, right? It's kind of like this mini death of,
Did you say
you know,
corpse pose?
pose. Correct. That's what it translates to English, because you kind of have this mini death, right? This mini death of who you are before you started class and this person you are after, right? So it's this transformative process where in corpse pose your body integrates what you learned throughout that session, and no other exercise program has that.
That is so interesting. Like I'm still stuck on the corpse pose. And it is funny because when we do get to these classes, right? Whatever classes they might be, we do show up with an energy. And I don't know if we are aware of that when we do get into these spaces that, okay, hey, maybe I just came from across the campus and I'm like trying to make it and finally in my seat, not realizing, oh, okay, hey, you showed up with a certain energy. This is a space now where you can release it if you are aware in your body. And then uh, thinking about sitting there after you're done doing whatever stretches or pulls or poses, and now you're done with it. Because I remember, because I did do yoga when I was in India, and we did do the shavasana pose. I didn't know that that's what the name was. We just sat and we laid down like on the floor flat, not doing
Beautiful.
anything. Was that the shavasana?
Yeah.
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 And I thought to myself, why am I sitting here doing nothing?
Interesting.
And then now it all came full circle. It's like, hello, it was for you to sit with yourself, to be there
Exactly.
and just allow your body either to release what it was that you were feeling or just to be present.
Exactly, because that's a very Westerner mindset, right? It's like, what am I supposed to be doing? I'm supposed to be doing something. I'm paying this person. They, they have to be showing me something, right? When in actuality, it's being. We're being. We're just being, right?
Talk about that, the Westerner mindset versus like outside of the US, what that looks like when we are in that space of being, and how yoga does allow us to be centered.
I am a Westerner, right? Like I grew up here, so I know the Westerner mind very, very well. Just living in, growing up in the United States, and I think that's kind of what drew me to yoga, because there is another way to think of things. It doesn't have to be the doing, right? There is like this being, and that's kind of like the process of studying it for yourself. What does that mean, the being? It's not something that I can do or show you per se. It's a state of finding that for yourself. That's like the inner work. That's the inner job. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense for me because I feel like I've been doing a work. So how did you get introduced to yoga, and like how did you get introduced to yoga, and how did you come into, I guess, wanting to open up a yoga space for yourself? Because we all have a moment where something is so impactful to us that it leaves an impression with us, and
Yeah,
then we either adapt to something and it becomes our lifestyle.
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because for me, it was just like this gradual, slow roll. I get in, someone's like, hey, let's do a yoga class. And it was like just kind of on a whim. This happened like when I was 25, right? And I was just like, oh, okay. And, I feel like, in retrospect, now that I'm turning 50, 25 years, it's just like, oh, there
Did you
was a
say you're
beginning.
turning 50?
I'm turning 50 this year.
Oh, friend, you look great.
Thanks.
Is that what yoga does? It reverses our age?
Well, and then it's the being, right? Like I accept that and I appreciate that, and it's yeah. Let's go back to the being, right? It's like it did open something for me, and I look back. Yeah, okay, it's a long story. I'm sorry. I'm kind of let me
No,
start
no,
from
no, no. We're good on time. Girl,
okay.
please. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Let's get in. Let's get in this thing.
Yeah, I know I'm like starting like 30 years ago, but no. It happened on a whim. It was like the late 90s. And I think in the late 90s, that's when, so the 60s, the 50s is maybe when it started getting popular in the US, right? Like that's when yoga came to the West. And it just kind of snowballed, and like it just kind of fell into my lap in the 90s. Like in the 90s, I think, and in Los Angeles, that's where all the yoga, it's okay. I think it started in like Northern California. So I was living in Southern California at the time, and then there was yoga studios at every corner basically. So it was
Mm,
just like became mainstream, it became popular, and I just kind of jumped on the bandwagon, you
mm.
know. And then through my pregnancies, through parenting, and now I'm going through perimenopause, I look back in my life and I'm like, yoga's just been such a, you know, pillar. And it's just been such a, stable, trustworthy, deep lifestyle choice that it's like, what am I going to do with the rest of my life but to keep studying this. And that's how I came about to, becoming a yoga teacher. I didn't actually, when I became a yoga teacher, I was just like, I just want to deepen my knowledge. And then once got the certification, it's like, how do I not tell people about this? How do I not talk about this? And
Mm.
so now it's, that's what I do with my life now. I want to teach yoga.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, what did you do any studying, or like you just were introduced to yoga and now it was a way for you to like kind of tap out just in case like you felt like life was being a little bit too much for you, or whenever you what was that like triggered you, just the introduction of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I got introduced to it, and then, life kinda happens, and you're like, "What do I do?" And I do yoga, and I'm like, "Oh, everything's okay," and it's like, "Oh, I'm pregnant," or "I wanna have kids. What do I do?" I wanna get my body, like, the best shape possible so I can,
Mhm.
have a healthy pregnancy. Let me do yoga. Oh, I'm
Mm.
pregnant. What kind of exercises can I do? Oh, I can do yoga. So at every stage of my life, it was like yoga was there for me. And now it's like, oh,
Got
I'm
it.
50. What does that mean? And I'm like, let me do yoga.
Yeah,
Just always there
that's
for
how
me.
I'm gonna pivot a little bit because I met you through Valerie,
Yeah,
and you guys had taken these classes. It's conscious parenting. Is that right?
correct. Yes.
How does that get integrated into your life? What do you do with that?
Yeah, so wonderful. Dr. Shafali is amazing. She's the one that we studied with. And she grew up in India. And so she grew up with that Eastern philosophy, right? And then she comes to the US and she studies, you know, um, I think she went to like Columbia University and became a clinical psychologist. So she has that good mix of the Eastern Western, right? So,
Nice.
doing this, yeah, it's just mixing it together is just perfect. The Eastern and Western philosophy just really blends well. That's what yoga is too, right? This Eastern philosophy coming to the West.
So I guess what are the philosophies of I guess conscious parenting? How do they help people in, I guess, becoming better parents? Is that the idea of the program?
It's the being again, like going back to the being, right? Because the Westerners always like, how do you do it? What are you doing? And then it's the beingness and just the acceptance of the present moment is the Eastern part of it. And then,
Okay.
so how do you do the both, right? You can't just keep doing all the time, and you can't just be meditating, sitting still all the time. How do you do both, right? And so that's the Eastern and Western philosophies that I talk about.
Okay. So I guess what are some of the key points that Dr. Shivali talks about in conscious parenting?
Key points such as, the acceptance of the as is. Yeah,
Hmm. I don't know. Valerie told me about it,
right.
like as we have conversations, but I don't really know like the deep, I guess the more deeper philosophies of what conscious parenting in. Like the reason why it caught my attention is I'm a parent. I like to be conscious about the actions that I am providing as develop myself, and then also to how I show up as a parent. So that's how we clicked, and that's actually how we met, because we were talking about the things that we experienced through our parents and what we felt was missing, and then what we wanted to integrate into our life so that we can show up with more love, with more compassion, with more empathy. So I just wanted to see how that shows up for you in your life, and what kind of philosophies like you've taken. I know you talked about being I know you talk about being present, but how does that look like in a situation in your life that people can identify with, as relatable? Because we can say what being is, but how does that look like in a situation in your life? Could you provide some examples of that?
Right. Yeah. So, talking about conscious parenting, it's good to compare it to traditional parenting, right? So we grew up in this hierarchical type of relationship, right? The parent is always right, the parent knows better, and then the parent creates this rules for the kids. And so there's a disconnection there, because there is the parent, again, it's like the hierarchy where, right? So that's the traditional parenting. You have does that make sense? Right? So
Yeah.
with conscious parenting, it's, releasing that ego that keeps us in um, that hierarchical relationship.
Yeah. So breaking out of the pattern of what we were cultivated to think, cultivated to react to. Is that what I'm hearing?
Right, like the releasing the need to um, be like this this parental, this western, let me see if I can find the words for it.
The version of our parents?
Yeah, to put it bluntly, right? Like, just the easy way to say it, right? Right. So in my experience, I grew up in a Catholic family, right? So
Okay.
there's lots of rules, lots of regulations, lots of tradition. And what drew me to conscious parenting is that, it doesn't have to, I don't have to raise my kids that way, and that
Mm,
they have their own autonomy, they have their own voice. And my job as a parent is not to tell them what to do, it's to support them in expressing their own individuality, and not put my expectation of what they're supposed to be. They're not supposed to, follow my religion. They're not supposed, they don't have to follow what I expect success to look like, because they're already
mm,
successful. They're already perfect in their own way.
mm. I love that. I love that for you. And I've definitely adapted that for myself as well. Because I did grow up in that same kind of environment where the parents, like you said, they have a hierarchy of who's in charge, whose voice matters, what direction the family needs to go, what belief systems we need to have. And as I became older, I decided that some of those things I don't want to agree with. And
And they don't,
so,
yeah, and it's not working for me, right? It's not working for my family.
yeah,
And then there's no connection. I want to deepen my connection with my children. So I need to be more conscious about my beliefs and what am I
mm,
putting onto them, and let them express their own beliefs and let them decide their own beliefs.
yeah. What does deepening your connection with them look like?
To always, for me, it's like checking myself. It's, if they come home and they have, like, a F on their report card, instead of reacting and saying, why are you, not doing your homework or this and that, it's going beneath that. It's like, is there something going on in school where she's not feeling supported and not
Mm.
wanting to do her work? And being more conscious about what's the deeper meaning, and not just what it looks like on the report card.
Oh, I like
And
that. So you're
and,
asking
like,
deeper questions.
yeah, and, like, hearing her side of the story, being open to what she has to say, as opposed to coming jumping to conclusions and thinking, oh, she's, messing around and not taking school seriously, you know?
That's great. That's great. Um, because I've said this a lot, quite a bit before on my podcast. Because sometimes, um, if the kids don't have a safe space to share what it is
Correct.
that they're feeling, or have that expression, they're going to share it with somebody, whether it's you or somebody else. So I always said that our households be the space of safety, um, because we don't really want them to be out there getting information or finding solace in a place that really doesn't have any good intent for them.
Right,
Yeah.
that's conscious parenting right there, right? You're
Mm,
having that consciousness and that awareness of, I want to be connected to my child and I want a safe space for my child, you know?
mm. So I'm gonna kind of go back and forth with yoga. So how do the kids, do they integrate the yoga sessions with you?
No.
How does that work for them? No, it's just for
No.
you.
When they were younger, I introduced it to them, and then I have to release, this works for me, and I'm not gonna force it on them, right? It's like this, it's not a hierarchy where it's like, "Hey, it works for me, you gotta do it." It's like, no. Let them grow, you know?
I like that you said that it's just for you and then you have to release. What does that mean? Because I think maybe some people that are watching, they may not get what that idea of release is. Like, okay, yoga is something that I use for myself to center me. That doesn't mean that my kids have to use that. What does that mean, release? So that what kind of people can.
Yeah, it's right, you can't change anyone, right? It's like, I offer you this gift, if you don't take it, then I say, "Okay," and I let it go and I release it. You don't have to take the gift from me, you know? It's okay for you to say no. Like, you're
Mm,
autonomous and right, it's like we're always constantly giving opportunities and gifts, and we just, if it works for us, great. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So that's a release of what
mm,
doesn't, resonate with you.
mm. Because I also thought that it could also be an expectation, right? Hey, if
Sure.
I'm doing this, I also would want you to do the same thing. And that's why I thought, oh, okay, maybe that's what she means by that.
Definitely, that's you. And that's part of conscious parenting too. What are these expectations we're putting on our children, right? And
Hmm.
where is that coming from? And it's, why do I expect my children to do yoga? It's like I
Mm,
shouldn't have that expectation because they have their own life, you know?
mm. Yeah, 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 yeah. That's parents, that's really all we can do is, right, provide
Exactly.
with an opportunity. And it's up to them to take the tools that we've provided to them and use them. I noticed in your bio it mentioned that you're a 500 RYT yoga what does that mean?
Oh, it's a certification with Yoga Alliance. So it's a 500 registered yoga teacher. And I also am certified as a yoga therapist through the International Association of Yoga Therapy.
What's the difference?
So the yoga instructor, right? There's a 200 level, which is I want to say it's like 200 hours of studying, and then the 500 is a 500-hour. Then
Okay.
um, right, so it's just a different level of how many hours you've studied and how many hours you've taught as well.
Okay.
And with the International Association of Yoga Therapists, yoga therapy is um, it's this organization that does a lot of research and provides a lot of research of how yoga can be used as therapy. So it's just because a little bit more specific and wanting it to be more uh, recognized by the medical field as a healing modality.
Mm, mm. Do you find that clients, when they come to you, what are they usually Because sometimes when people are seeking healing modalities, it could be because they experience some type of trauma, which is something that I talk about a lot. Um, what do you find, or I guess what stages are people in their own lives that do they find themselves at your yoga studio?
Yeah. Yeah, it's curiosity too. I think a lot of people, they just, and you hear a lot about yoga and they're just curious, like, okay, I just, hear that it's great for helping your, joints and your strength and your, anxiety. And yeah, a lot of people just come for and it's accessible too. And it's you don't have a lot of in a gym you'll have like a lot of like um, weights and stuff like that. So I think it's even less intimidating because you just kind of go into the studio and it's for the most part very minimal and calm.
I was gonna
I
say, like, okay, what kind of bodies do we need to have in order for us to work out with yoga? Because I'm a plus size girl,
Mhm.
so I feel like something like that would be intimidating because I'd have to hold my own weight.
Interesting. Oh yeah, okay. I hear you. Okay. So notice, you know, yeah, okay. It's it is for everybody, right? I modify all my poses for everybody. It's, and again, that's why I kind of love yoga because my teachers are like in their 60s and in their 70s. I see people in their 90s, doing yoga. So age wise, and also um, it's unfortunate. That's the thing about yoga being mainstream, right? We have these images of like, oh, these yoga pants, and they're, like Lululemon. I probably shouldn't be saying their name, but it's like, you say
We
yoga and
are
then
not
you have,
sponsored by Lululemon, by the way.
sorry, what, again?
Oh no, I was just saying we're not sponsoring Lululemon, by the way. We're just yoga pants. They just happen to come up in conversation.
Yeah, right. Sorry. But just very mainstream yoga images, right? So that's something that is um, those are ads, those are marketing things, and you know it's not about size, it's not about age, it's not about any of that. It's so universal. Like yoga is so
Okay.
universal. Yeah.
Okay, so it's inclusive. So I don't have to feel
Yeah.
like, okay, maybe I won't be able to get this pose. So you help us modify so that way we're able to participate.
Correct. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, because
Okay.
yoga isn't about like, "Oh, let me, gain this much amount of muscle, let me, fit into my." I mean, maybe it starts off that way, that people wanna have this idea of their body, but again, it's like it has this philosophy behind it, of reach the ultimate goal of yoga is to reach freedom, is to reach, um, samadhi, which is enlightenment. That's the purpose of it all. If you happen to, lose 10 pounds while you do it, that's great, but that's a byproduct. That's not the purpose of doing yoga.
I wanted to ask you earlier because you mentioned like the principles of yoga, and then you had mentioned a few names, like we talked about earlier, the shavasana. But I think I don't know, was there three or five, I guess, basic principles of yoga? Could you share that what that is?
Well, yoga, okay, there's uh, there's actually 8
Eight.
limbs of
Okay.
yoga, and you have yamas, you have niyamas, you have the asana, the pranayama, meditation. So yamas are okay. It's it's a lot.
No, break it down for
It's
us.
not a lot.
We got 30 minutes.
I just I just kind of like jump between like Sanskrit and English. So let me just try to stick to English. So the first one is personal observances. Then the second one is social observances. Then you have the asana, which is the physical poses that you see a lot of. then you have the breathing, the pranayama, then you have the meditation, you have concentration. Yeah, what am I up to? And then the
Uh,
last, yeah,
personal, physical, breathing, meditation, and then I forgot this last one. I only have 4, but you said there's 8.
right. Um, so the the 8 limbs of yoga. So instead of just kind of going through all of those,
Hmm.
the main things I think is important is the asana, which usually brings what usually brings people to class, right? They see the postures and that's what they're drawn to. Then
Okay.
pranayama, which is breathing techniques, I feel like is the next most popular thing because there are a lot
Hmm.
of the breathing classes now. Um, then ultimately, bliss, enlightenment, that's what the goal of yoga is. And you know going through the 8 limbs of yoga is eventually going to lead you there.
To enlightenment.
And enlightenment, that's the goal of it all. That's the
Okay.
purpose of why we go on our mat.
I didn't know that breathing was a part of yoga. I mean, I thought it really was more like Buddhism. Like,
I feel like
that's
it's all intertwined. Like the philosophies are kind of similar as well, you know?
okay. Could you go over what those 8 things are? Because I'd really be interested to. I just want to look over what that would be afterwards.
Okay,
So you
so you have
what?
the yama, which is the moral disciplines or like moral vows,
Okay.
right? And so with that, it's nonviolence, it's truthfulness, non-stealing, um, the right use of energy, and non-greed.
Okay.
And then you go to the niyamas, which is positive duties or observances. That's like cleanliness, contentment, tapas, which is discipline or desire, svadhyaya, which is self-study, self-reflection. Ishvara pranayama is surrendering to a higher power. So that's not like you have to believe in God. It's more of like, accepting the universe, accepting this power that the universe has. But, some people can translate that to believing in God.
Okay.
And then, so the third one is asana, the postures that we see. Pranayama is the breathing techniques.
Okay.
And the number 5 is pratyahara, sense withdrawal. So after we
It's sensory
do the,
withdrawal.
right. So that's after the breathing, after the asana, then it's time where you're starting to go more inward. So that's like a sense withdrawal. You're going more inward. Then we have 6, which is dharana, which is a focused concentration. And that's just going deeper and deeper into 7, which is the meditative absorption. And then samadhi, which is bliss or enlightenment. And that's the final. And then, these are set up with steps. That being said, it's like life isn't linear, right? So
Mm-mm.
sometimes, you'll take a step back, you'll take a step forward. And it's like, who actually reaches number 8? Who actually like, maybe, if you believe in Jesus, Jesus did, maybe, Buddha, it's like, who reaches number 8, ideally, like that's and if you believe in like, several different lives, maybe you don't even reach it in this lifetime,
Mm. So interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, I enjoyed that. Thank you for sharing that with us because I was going to ask you and you totally shut my question down. I was
Sorry.
like, No, you're good. Because I was like, oh, what stage do you think you reached? And then you're like, well, life is not linear. I'm like, well, there goes that question.
Right. Yeah, yeah. And that's like the Western, I keep saying Westerner, but that's just kind of like the mainstream kind of thing. It's just like, oh, what are the steps you take? And it's, life isn't linear, right? It's like you're
Right.
sometimes it's just like, why did I make that mistake again? Because now you have to learn it on a deeper level. It's not something that you pass and then you move on to the next level. Sometimes it is, but sometimes, we go in sometimes we have to go around in circles, you know?
Yeah, totally. There is going back to yoga therapy, what kind of situations do people find themselves utilizing yoga therapy?
It's usually physical, if someone has like a lower back issue and they're like, "Oh, we've tried everything." Sometimes they're like, "Okay, let me just, try yoga therapy." And, you know, anxiety, depression, you know, those types of issues. Some, people are just looking for help and you hear about yoga and the therapeutic aspects of it, and that's usually how I get my clients.
Hmm. Do when people are like, I was gonna ask, when people are like in the middle of their, I guess, experience with yoga, is there something that you like, stories that you've heard that maybe they were healed from something or reach a point of enlightenment for themselves? Not they're going to reach that end part of the
Less enlightenment.
yeah.
I hear people, that they yoga does save lives in a sense of it just um, supports healing, and I can't really speak for anyone else. Like, no, nothing really pops out of my mind. I can only just like speak from my,
Personal experience. Yeah.
experience, and it's, it's just a better. Uh, like when I don't practice yoga, I can feel the difference in my energy level. I can just feel the difference in my body, and so yeah, unfortunately, I'm sorry I can't think of a situation right now, a
Okay.
story.
No worries. Is there anything else that you wanted to share about yoga that you think that would be pertinent to those that are listening? Like how it is applicable for them? I mean, besides all the other beautiful benefits that you said, it helps us with grounding, it helps with our body, to sculpt it, it helps us spiritually. And I don't know if I already said mentally grounding. If I did it, I'm just repeating it again.
Yeah, just with yoga, it is, so mainstream now, which is like a plus and a minus. Because on one hand, it's good to know that people have heard about it. Just be mindful of what you've heard about it and to experience it for yourself if you haven't. And finding a teacher that you connect with and can study with, as opposed to just being in a group class. Sometimes I think the one-on-one um, relationship really helps deepen the practice of yoga. You know.
Mm. One-on-one with the instructor or one-on-one, like, by themselves with
Yeah,
others,
one-on-one,
or
definitely with the instructor, and yeah, a home practice as well, right? You go to class and you learn something, and again, you bring it home, and you practice at home and study it for yourself.
Mm, okay. Are there, some maybe points of references that they can, source? Like, are there some books that if they're interested in studying about yoga that you could provide for them?
I highly recommend Iyengar yoga. So he
Iyengar yoga?
IY let me type it out. IYENGAR. So Iyengar yoga is um, a type of yoga where we do use a lot of props. We use, like, if you'll see the bricks, if you see like blankets and stuff and straps, those are ways to help modify poses. Like if you can't reach your feet, then you'll use a strap to, you know, help facilitate the pose. Or
Like
you can use bricks.
like the rubber band straps?
There's just regular straps. I mean, you could even use like a belt if you don't have a strap at home.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, Iyengar yoga is, I feel like, is the best type of yoga for all bodies and all shapes and sizes, and because it does have that modifications, and it does have a lot of therapeutic benefits. Yeah.
Iyengar yoga. Okay. She said Iyengar.
Yeah, yoga.
Um, s- Tell people where they can find you. And because I don't know if the people know that you're in Arizona. Is that correct?
Correct. I'm in Scottsdale yoga. I'm in Scottsdale yoga. I'm in Arizona, Scottsdale, and scottsdaleyogatherapy.org is my website.
Okay, super. And do you have any social media handles that they can?
I'm not a big social media person. I have LinkedIn. I'm Maureen Mayo at LinkedIn. And yeah, I'm not on like Instagram. I'm not on Facebook. I'm very old school, I guess, in that sense. I'm very limited with yeah, I'm open to Zoom calls on one-on-ones. And yeah, just if you want to reach out, definitely check out my website and book a Zoom call.
Okay, so it's scottsdaleyoga.com.
Therapy.org. Org. O-R-G.
Scottsdale Therapy. Okay. Okay. I will put your link inside of the stream once we're over. But we're going to go into our session on the round robin where you provided me with some numbers, and I'm going to ask you a few questions so that the people can get to know you a little bit better. Are you
Great.
ready?
Yeah.
All right.
I have to be, right?
Yes, yes. So the first question is, where did you grow up, and did that affect who you became?
Yeah. Oh gosh. I was born in the Philippines, and I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I moved there when I was 2. I went through high school and college in New York, and once I moved, gosh, it wasn't until outside of New York that I realized, oh goodness, I lived in such a bubble. Like there was so much diversity where I grew up, and I grew up with like so many different types of cultures and foods, and I was just so surprised when I moved out of that bubble that not every place was like that. So that was like a big wake up call for me when I was like, "What do you mean I can't find any beef patties with cocoa bread?" It's like, where do I find that? And being in Arizona, I can't find it.
Okay. I was like, oh, where did you move to that you that they didn't have that? Okay, makes
Yeah.
sense. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. Um, your next question is there any question you wish I had asked you?
Any question? Oh, there's like this. I not necessarily, but there is like this icebreaker question that I usually ask people. What what can you tell me that I can't tell? What can you tell me something about yourself that I can't tell by looking at you?
I love
Right.
that question.
Yeah. So it's like you can't tell that I'm a lefty, you know? Yeah, so it's just silly,
That
right? It's well, not even silly, but it's just like something interesting. It's like what don't I
no.
know about you by looking at you?
I like that question.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, not a lot of people would know, I mean, that by looking at each other, unless is there something distinctive about people with left hands? Left-handed
It's just
writing?
it's just something interesting, right? It's just
I
funny
mean,
when, yeah, go ahead.
they do. I think they said that people that are left-handed, they're way more creative. They tend to be business owners. They tend to, um, I guess, be go-getters.
Oh,
I don't
interesting.
know. Yeah, have you heard what some of the left-handed?
Yeah, something about using the right side of your brain more. So creativity for sure. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Have you seen those things play out in your life?
I see myself as creative, so I would say yes, you know. But I didn't know about the
Okay.
business
All right.
owners thing. So, but that checks out.
All right, she's like, "I am that." All right, your last one is, what keeps you up at night?
What keeps me up at night? That's funny. Um, lately, I just started teaching this class for seniors, a chair yoga class for seniors. So lately, thinking about new
Did you say chair yoga?
chair yoga for
Like in the
seniors.
chair. Oh, I
Correct.
gotta join that. I don't think it
Yeah,
should be a senior thing because a lot of our jobs nowadays are all sedentary. So like,
yeah.
okay, that should be named as sedentary yoga.
Okay, I'm gonna go with that. Maybe I'll yeah,
Yeah,
I'll market that.
yeah, office yoga. Office
Yeah,
yoga. I mean, that makes so much sense because that's what we're doing. We're sitting. Please tell me more about it, girlfriend.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's what's keeping me up at night. I'm like, oh, how else can I do this pose in a chair? So that's what I've been thinking about lately.
Mm. Could you give us maybe a pose or two that people can walk away with before you leave the show today? Doing
Shoulders is a big thing. Sorry.
okay. I said doing the chair yoga.
The main thing that I do with the chair yoga is to be mindful of your lower body, right? Because we are sitting on the chair and we have all this attention with typing and, our eyes are, you know, so what's our lower body doing, right? And I
Mm.
generally don't have shoes on, so pressing into your heels, pressing in your toe mounds, spreading your toes and just bringing some aliveness to that because the bottom of your
Huh.
feet has those muscles that need to be um, that need yeah I mean
Yes.
like when you walk and stuff you need those muscles active, so activate your feet and the alignment of the knee underneath the ankle underneath the knee, so just be mindful of that alignment. That's better for your knees than just
Oh,
you know yeah
okay. I like that. Thank you for those.
yeah
So making sure that the bottom mounds of our heels are digging into the ground to give it some movement, and then spreading
yeah
our toes to also give it movement as well. And then making sure that our heels and our knees are in alignment. What is it better for? Is it better for, well, what is it providing health to, I guess, besides, I feel like it's giving posture, or is it like circulation?
Yeah, both posture, circulation, attention, awareness that you have knees. It's like giving some love to your knees and your ankles, you know.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, office yoga. All right, everyone. Once again, you can find Maureen's website is scottsdaleyogatherapy.org. And Maureen is a certified yoga therapist and a yoga instructor. She is based in Scottsdale, Arizona. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop in the chat. I don't see anything in here. But you can also find her links that will be on the videos afterwards. Maureen, thank you again for joining. If you can hold on, and then I'll just end the streams.
Thank you, Fran.
You're welcome.